Hello, greetings. I'm Luis Guillermo Garcia Bencomo. On behalf of our production team, we welcome you to our special review program 2024 on teleSUR. In particular, we will address the difficult events that the world has experienced in relation to the crisis in the Middle East, and of course, the genocide suffered by Palestine by the criminal action of Zionism based in Israel and driven by the United States. Last October 7, 2024 marked 1 year since the Israeli Zionist regime increased the genocide it has been perpetrating against the civilian population in the Gaza Strip and throughout Palestine for more than 6 decades. More than a year ago, Israeli military forces laid siege to the Gaza Strip and forced its inhabitants to flee their homes, resulting in multiple forced displacements. For decades, Israel has violated the right of Palestinians to have their own state and live as a free people. Its objective of murdering thousands of families under the excuse of a war against the resistance movement Hamas have been in evidence since October 7, 2023. Gaza is suffering from more than a year of devastation. The numbers tell a heartbreaking story of hospitals in ruins, destroyed, and generations wiped out. Israel's genocide against the Palestinian population in Gaza was the beginning of the largest human massacre of the 21st century. According to the latest report of the Gaza Ministry of Health, the number of people killed in the region exceeds 45,000, despite international calls for a ceasefire. The report reveals that in more than a year, Israel has committed 9,900 massacres in the Gaza Strip and wiped out some 1,410 entire families. Documents also report that the Zionist attacks have claimed lives of almost 18,000 children and over 12,000 women, leaving more than 100,000 civilians wounded and 11,000 missing. The Israeli military continues to intensify the military occupation and blockade. In addition, the dehumanizing statements by Israeli leaders and the systematic attacks are part of a strategy aimed at the elimination of the Palestinian people. States, multilateral bodies, and social movements have recognized the strength of the Palestinian people and their determination to resist Israeli genocide, while condemning the passivity of countries of the Western Axis by allowing the execution of crimes that violate the UN Charter, international law, and international humanitarian law, raising a call for peace, peaceful, and civilized coexistence between nations. In addition, the right to self-determination of peoples. In Palestine, the Israeli occupation army assassinated more than 190 journalists and media workers while they were carrying out their work. This is happening in the midst of the genocide that the Zionism is carrying out from Israel and continues to perpetrate in the Gaza Strip. About this, our colleague Judah Hagasi has more details. During this genocidal war of Israel towards the Gaza Strip, journalists and media workers have been one of the main targets for the Israeli occupation army. According to the Government Media Bureau, more than 190 journalists have been killed at the hands of the occupation army, more than half of them while doing their job of broadcasting the image and news from here, the Gaza Strip. And that can be seen as a message from the Israeli regime that it does not want journalists to continue transmitting information, to continue transmitting the message of truth to the outside world so that it knows and is aware of the crimes committed by the Israeli regime. However, not only the killing of journalists has been affecting the media workers, but also we have been facing extraordinary difficulties. We're talking about the fact that we have been suffering and continue to suffer the same consequences and difficulties as the Gazans. We have been in continuous evacuation. We have found ourselves without shelter. We have found ourselves far from our families. We have lost relatives. We have lost loved ones, even our homes. And therefore, we have not only been working to show what is happening in the Gaza Strip, but also we have being part of this massacre and this tragedy, just as the Gazans are living. After our experience of covering different wars in the Gaza Strip, we can say that this war has been the most genocidal and the most atrocious that we have lived through. We're saying that we are already 14 consecutive months covering destruction, covering death, and the loss of loved ones, and so far nobody is doing anything to stop this difficult situation. And therefore the message from here, from the journalists, is that despite the difficulties that we're facing, we will continue with our mission. We will continue doing our work to keep sending the message of the truth to the world, so that the world can witness the crimes that the Israeli army commits and continues to commit against civilians and also against journalists here in the Gaza Strip. Thank you, Huda. Well, in the midst of the genocide against the Palestinian people, the basic infrastructures have been totally affected, destroyed after the bombings, as well as 95% of the educational centers, which aggravates the humanitarian crisis and deprives future generations. The Palestinian people live under Israeli restrictions, causing extreme poverty, human rights abuses, massive destruction of homes, justified in the Israeli law of absentee property, which prohibits Palestinians from claiming property until the cessation of the conflict. In the midst of the intense Israeli military operations since October 7, more than 90% of all homes in Gaza have been destroyed, according to aid organizations. According to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, at least 242 schools have been damaged, and the World Health Organization reports that nearly 190 attacks on healthcare centers and hospitals were carried out. Meanwhile, in another report, the World Health Organization has verified 541 attacks on health facilities and medical transport in Gaza, resulting in 833 deaths and 1,206 injuries between October 7, 2023 and October 31, 2024. Likewise, the agency estimates that around 14,000 patients need to be evacuated from Gaza for urgent specialized care. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs has counted at least 1.9 million displaced people in Gaza and stressed that the humanitarian goods must be allowed in on a large scale and supply routes opened in Gaza to address the humanitarian crisis. As the conflict escalates, Israeli genocide continues. The international community recognizes Palestine as a state and rejects Israel's claims to exterminate the Palestinian people. One of the most intense dramas in Palestine is that of being a mother, especially in the Gaza Strip, the most affected coastal enclave by the Israeli siege, where mothers struggle day after day to survive amidst the wave of violence in the region. But how have Palestinian mothers been affected by the war? Amid the devastation that has marked Israel's war against Palestine from October 2023 to the date, at least 2 mothers in Gaza lose their lives every hour. More than 80 women have a high probability of complications in childbirth due to poor medical care. The famine in Gaza affects women and girls who sacrifice their food to feed their families, increasing risks for pregnant women and nursing mothers. The crisis is aggravated by lack of shelter for women and shortage of access to food and basic resources. Women heading single-parent households face additional challenges, especially those who have lost their husbands in the conflict. Over 7,000 women have died, resulting in at least 15,000 orphaned children. The situation has generated a large number of displaced people, with approximately 1 million women and girls among them. However, many women remain at home in shelters to care for family members unable to move, facing increasingly precarious conditions. Many women are forced to face childbirth without anesthesia. There has been an alarming increase in the incidence of miscarriages among women due to high levels of physical and emotional distress, as well as lack of access access to emergency medical care. Well, it's time to set our first break, and we do so with images of Paris Saint-Germain fans' behavior during a match against Atletico de Madrid for the Champions League, an important event where fan behavior is shown. Let's watch it. What the Israeli regime is doing with the support of the United States against Palestine is nothing other than the first and most bloody stage of the expansionist process of Zionism with the expression of imperialism. Since its creation in 1948, the Zionist State of Israel has been a key player in the destabilization of the Middle East region. Over the decades, its expansionist policy has generated tensions and conflicts that resonate today, affecting the stability of neighboring countries and the lives of millions of people. More than 70 years have passed since the implementation of plans that originated in history in a free Palestine began. The struggle for recognition and sovereignty of the Palestinian people has become a symbol of resistance against Israeli occupation and expansionism, a conflict that remains unresolved. The idea of Great Israel is a recurrent concept in the violent Zionist political narrative. This territorial project posits the inclusion of vast areas currently belonging to Arab states, including Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, and Iran, which poses serious implications for peace in the region and the viability of an independent Palestinian state. Southern Lebanon and the Golan Heights are clear examples of Israel's policy of territorial expansion. This territory has been the target of attacks and military incursions by Israel's Zionist army, and a broader strategy that seeks to consolidate Israeli power in the Middle East and ensure its dominant position. Israel's plan, in collaboration with the U.S. for Arab territories, focus on an aggressive and provocative vision, such as the theft of their mineral wealth, such as oil, settlement building, and military strengthening. These are just some of the actions that perpetuate the cycle of violence and resistance in the region. Israel continues to develop attacks on Syria and maintains an open confrontational posture with Iran. Tensions in the region show no signs of abating, and the international community is watching with concern how these actions could affect the future of peace in the Middle East. The question remains, how far will Israel go with its expansionist plan, and what we're building for regional stability? The situation in the Middle East is complex and volatile. Next month will be crucial to understand the direction of Israel's plan and how this will affect the search for a lasting peace in the region. Throughout this year, the Zionist regime of Israel has carried out several operations to prevent humanitarian aid from reaching the Gaza Strip. This has generated the repudiation of the international community, which demands an immediate ceasefire from Israel. The blockade imposed by Israel on humanitarian aid to the northern Gaza Strip as part of its initial genocidal offensive on October 7, 2023, has left between 65,000 and 75,000 Palestinians without access to food, water, or power supply or medical care, causing massive destruction and deadly famine. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs published a report detailing the dire and precarious survival conditions faced by civilians in northern Gaza Strip. It also highlighted the closure of bakeries, kitchen, and sanitation facilities. Where are we going? God is angry with Israel. They did everything to us. They told us to move to this safe area. As you can see, they heard us all. Where are we going? We were in the camp east of Can Yunis, and they moved us here. Where are we going now? Our children and our wives are all sick. The mass extermination offensive also affected the entry of fuel, preventing the operation, excavation, and first response teams in the areas most affected by bombings, where numerous families continue to search for their loved ones trapped under the rubble. In the midst of this scenario, UNRWA announced the suspension of its function in Palestine, demanding an immediate ceasefire from Israel after attacks of at least 100 humanitarian aid routes through the Keren Shalom crossing attempts on the life of UN workers. Several countries and organizations are urging Israel to put an end to its extermination plan against the Palestinian people, as well as the arbitrary and illegal detention of Palestinians, including children. Also, the end of torture and mistreatment inflicted on all detainees and prisoners. This year, the siege of the Zionist regime against Palestine has triggered a wave of mobilizations around the world. From many countries, citizens have expressed their rejection on the Israeli genocide and expressed their solidarity with the Palestinian, Lebanese, Syrian, Iranian, and Yemeni peoples, among other nations that support the Arab and Muslim resistance. In the Middle East, countries such as Jordan and Lebanon have been the scene of massive protests, where social movements have demonstrated their solidarity with the suffering of the Palestinian people. In Gaza, the humanitarian situation has prompted an urgent call for international aid from the population, while in Egypt, there were several expressions in favor of the Palestinians, highlighting the brotherhood of the Arab peoples against Tel Aviv's abuses. Meanwhile, in Europe, massive protests took place in several capitals, with thousands of people demonstrating in London in front of the Israeli embassy, in Paris, in the Republic Square, and in Berlin, where several communities participated in marches in favor of Palestine. Many citizens across the continent raised their voices to pressure the governments and take a more active posture for peace in the Middle East. Africa has been no stranger to mobilization. South Africa expressed strong support for both the Palestinian cause and its Arab sister countries. In this sense, mass marches were held in cities such as Cape Town and Johannesburg. Participants demanded that measures must be taken to protect the rights of the Palestinian people. Mobilizations in Asia were also significant. In Turkey, thousands marched in Istanbul, where speeches in support of Palestine were held. In Pakistan, demonstrations were also numerous, with protesters calling on the government to take stronger action in support of Palestinian rights. In other countries of the region, such as Malaysia and Indonesia, solidarity rallies were held with the support of political and religious leaders. In the US and Canada, mobilizations developed notably. In cities such as New York, Los Angeles, and Toronto, thousands of people gathered to protest against the siege of Palestine and the Arab countries. Activists from various organizations called for action, urging their governments to reconsider their policies towards the Middle East. Universities and schools have been the epicenter of debates, marches, and encampments, reflecting the interest of concern of the young people about the conflict. In Latin America, proposals in support of Palestine were generated in Argentina, where thousands of people gathered in Buenos Aires demanding an end to the violence and siege. Meanwhile, in Venezuela, demonstrators carrying Palestinian and Lebanese flags called for policies that encourage the nations of the world to intervene and put an end to Israel's Zionist genocide. The rejection of Israel's siege against Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria has generated a broad spectrum of mobilizations globally, uniting communities and countries in a call for peace and justice. As the situation in the region continues to escalate, these mobilizations are likely to intensify, reflecting the growing international concern for the welfare of the Palestinian people and the Middle East, and the need for a resolution in which peace endures. In the midst of the Israeli siege of the Palestinian people, one light shines through adversity and its cultural resilience, since despite all the challenges, diverse artistic manifestations have arisen, demonstrating that the human spirit cannot be silenced. This year, music festivals were held in support of the Palestinian cause. Artists from different countries came together to protest through music. With rhythms evoking struggle and resistance, these festivals became spaces of hope and love, where melodies rang with a longing for freedom. Likewise, poetry emerged as a powerful link of expression. At various poetry festivals, writers and speakers shared verses that recounted the suffering, resilience, and beauty of Palestinian life. Words flowed like a river of emotions, reminding everyone that despite the circumstances, creativity and culture are powerful weapons in the struggle for dignity. Film festivals have also come alive, presenting works that tell stories of resistance and resilience. Palestinian filmmakers have used the seventh art to make the reality visible, showing the world the richness of their culture and the challenges they face. These films not only entertain, but also educate and inspire action. The Palestinian cultural legacy is a symbol of resistance. The kafouya, the traditional Palestinian headscarf, was named a UNESCO Intangible Heritage and has become an emblem of identity and struggle. The olive tree, Palestine's sacred tree, represents the connection to the land and its ancestral heritage. These images are a constant reminder of the resistance of the people and their desire to preserve their culture despite oppression. The Dabke dance, with its vibrant steps and likable rhythms, unites its community in celebrations and demonstrations. In addition, Abrahamic traditions that share roots with other cultures of the region enrich the Palestinian identity, creating a cultural mosaic that transcends borders. This deeply rooted legacy continues to flourish in the midst of adversity, showing the world that culture is a form of resilience and hope. This way finishes our special review program 2024 of teleSUR, dedicated to the Middle East crisis, especially to the pain of the Palestinian people due to the genocide committed by Israel's Zionism against that nation that refuses to die and, on the contrary, is born in every boy and girl who manages to survive barbarism, as expressed by the noble Lady Caribbean singer Danny Rivera.
Resucitarás de las matanzas, volverán a respirar aún en los genocidios, reencarnarán en otros niños, la infancia masacrada en Palestina. El canto de alborada del gallo de oro, con su cantar de Moesía.